Right, let's talk about, because I think we need to, Peter Hitchens.
First of all, is he okay?
Well, I've been wondering that, because of course we quite like him, especially his early work.
Yeah.
He's greatly respected. You know, the office out there is just littered with his books. Yeah. You know, we've always thought well of the man.
I used to live in Oxford, and I used to see him occasionally. We used to get the same train back from London. Occasionally, we'd walk back together and have decent conversations. He seems like a nice enough chap. You know, I've only seen him smile once, but he seems like a decent enough bloke.
What on earth happened on the day he smiled?
It was actually the launch party for the Michaela movie, you know, the Michaela Community School documentary, and he smiled when he was there. Maybe it was the free drinks, I don't know, but that's the only time I've ever seen him smile.
He's once a decade allowance for smiles or something.
My motto was always never go full Hitchens, because he is the epitome of black pilled, isn't he? Like, it's bleak, despair, and despair is a sin.
Yes.
There's always hope.
But I do appreciate his works.
Absolutely.
I mean, I recommend this book, The Common Delusion. The opening few chapters of this is just a blistering tirade against the Conservative Party. It is a wonderful denunciation of everything that they are. I'm going to have to quote a little bit from this book. The Tories had also decided that New Labour's policies were not only dangerous, but desirable, and in fact enviable. In their view, New Labour's policies were not only the route back to office, they were good and acceptable policies by which any professional politician would be wise to adopt. The Conservative Party, in any case, is just as committed to New Labour as a fiercely egalitarian economic and social policy combined with very high public spending and dependent on for its success on excess borrowing. It entirely and unshakably supports Britain's membership of the European Union, which means it cedes 80% of its lawmaking powers and control of the national borders by the way of trade policy and foreign power. By implications, it ceases to have any real policies of its own on these topics. He's always been great on this stuff. He's consistently great. Well, he was consistently great. He even expressed the whole sentiment of 0 seats before Parvini. So Parvini basically just picked up Hitchens' idea from this book and just gave a modern spin on it and coined the term 0 seats. But he has been pushing this for much longer. Samson, can you play the video of Hitchens, please?
And it seems to me that people underestimate hugely the power of the political parties and the need to reform them. And they could be reformed. Now, I concentrate on the Conservative Party because most of the people who read me support the Conservative Party. And it's I've dedicated my life to, in the way that Emile Zola at one stage said that until Dreyfus was free, he wasn't going to write about anything else. I can't quite do that because the editor wouldn't approve of it. But I genuinely believe that my life's mission is to destroy the Conservative and Unionist Party. Because if only one could do that, we might get a serious Conservative Party which would produce all kinds of changes. Now look, imagine two corpses in the later stages of rigor mortis propped against each other. Knock one of them away, and the other one falls down. Now both the political parties are corpses. When I was growing up, they had millions of members. People went to their meetings. People voted for them enthusiastically. Now they're both dead within. They have nothing to do. If the Conservative Party fell, what would hold the Labour Party together? Nothing. The Labour Party is harmonious as Yugoslavia. They loathe each other. They can't stand each other. The only thing which keeps them together is the old... It's like an Animal Farm when the pigs say, if you don't do this, Jones will come back. In the Labour Party, it's if you don't do this, Thatcher will come back. And that's the only thing that holds them together. The Tories collapse, and they can't say that it's Thatcherism coming back, and they have a more rational, intelligent opposition. They haven't got anything either. So you could join me in my project.
So Peter had been making the case for many years that the uniparty system was just two corpses propped up against each other, and when one of them goes down, the other one will go down. And a lot of us embrace that view. The only difference is in 2010 it wasn't possible because the Tories were rising, Labour Party had sort of failed at that point. But in 2024 it was possible to destroy the Tory party to make way for a genuine right-wing party. And we understood, as this meme, describes here, the age of managed decline in blue is over and the time of managed decline in red has come.
This is the first opportunity we've had to put his plan into play.
Yes, it's the very first opportunity, yeah.
On the topic of Lord of the Rings references, I'm not sure you're going to make it, but he is the archetype of Denethor in the Lord of the Rings, that right. when the time is right to fight and stand your ground and actually stand up for what you believe in, he folded and gave up and abandoned hope and let the enemies in the gates.
Yeah, so given he'd been advocating this for some years, it came a bit of a surprise when... Oh, my clicker's not working. Can we go to the next link?
Oh.
There we go. So, it came a bit of a surprise to find that he was... he will argue this point. He wasn't suggesting anyone vote Tory. He was simply suggesting that they don't vote Reform and they don't vote Labour.
Yeah.
So Lib Dems okay then?
Well, Lib Dems never came up. So, I should mention that because he gets very, very upset when people suggest that he...
Very upset.
Yes, when he was suggesting that we were voting Tory. He was simply suggesting you should not vote for anyone who isn't Tory.
But the Tories have been doing this forever. This is part of what he was talking about, the parties propping them up. They've been saying... the Tories have been saying, don't let Labour get in. You'll have a Corbyn government. Don't vote for Labour. As in, vote for us because we're not the other guy. And Labour have been doing the same. Don't vote for the Tories because you'll get another Thatcher.
Yep.
Like, they have never had a selling point. They've never had a reason to vote for them. It's always against the other person. And so he's just doing the Tory party line.
Well, it is a bit of propaganda, really, because it's not inevitable that you have to vote for them, right?
No.
You can vote for other people. Maybe they won't win, but that's the point of democracy, right? You vote for the people that you want to win.
Yeah.
If you vote tactically, sure, sometimes it might get results, but also you're sacrificing your principles. It's the ends justify the means, which is how you get, the Soviet Union.
So there's been great bafflement on our side with what Peter was coming at. And I think I might have figured some of it out. Okay. I mean, he will tell us no, of course, but I think I might have figured some of this out. He wrote this article, for example, which is rather devoid of an argument, but I picked some bits out of it. He was saying, when asked, why were you in favour of 0 seats and then you flipped against it? He says, well, in 2010 and for many years before, the problem is this: the Conservative Party was the target of a push. The aim of this push was to rip up all remaining Conservative fixtures and fittings of the Tory Party and make it conform to revolutionary changes made in this country by the 1997 Blair-Campbell government. Absolutely right. Yeah. The Tory party has become a blue Blairite party. He goes on to say, I still believe that had any members of the Conservative commentariat, including those who now follow Reform, joined in my attack, Cameron could have been so badly defeated in 2010 that the Tory party would have split and collapsed, making way for a new, properly Conservative formation that would have easily swept aside Gordon Brown at the next election. Brown, remember, was isolated, exhausted and deserted by the Blairites. So, I mean, what he's trying to say there is that 2010 represented an opportunity because the way Labour Party was fundamentally weaker.
So he's like, you didn't join me when I wanted to do it, therefore it's not worth doing that. I don't understand. Like, we weren't ready in 2010.
Well, I was also 15 years old, so I mean, I can't be blamed for that one.
The opportunity wasn't as ripe as it was this year.
And I would go further and say the Labour Party is still ridden and divided. I mean,
absolutely.
A simple point is Labour won this election with fewer votes than Corbyn got in either of his 2 elections.
So since 2010, the Corbynistas have taken a massive grasp of the Labour Party. So the Labour Party is more splintered now than it was in 2010.
Yeah. So I can guarantee the Labour Party will fracture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in fact, the larger the majority of the Labour Party had, the more likely and the quicker it is to fracture. But it will. I mean, you'll start having all sorts of caucuses. I mean, you'll have a Gaza caucus, you have a Muslim caucus, you have all of these sort of caucuses that start to appear. The trade unionist caucus, they will start fighting, as well as that strong Corbyn thing, because bluntly, Starmer got fewer votes than Corbyn did. Yeah. Corbyn lost his elections, of course, but because the Tories were so
it's also
unpopular.
A lot of bitterness within the Labour Party about how Corbyn was dealt with, because I'm certainly no fan of Jeremy Corbyn, but I do think that some of the things that the Labour Party did to him were a little bit unfair. And if, someone as right-wing as I can say that and recognise that in the Labour Party, it sort of begs the question, well, what do the people on the left of the Labour Party think?
Yes. He says, meanwhile, Starmer, unlike Brown in 2010, will not be easy to remove. By enfranchising 16-year-olds, and I strongly suspect EU citizens living in this country, an idea he has espoused but claims to have now dropped, he will make himself hard to shift. If he succeeds, his plan's constitutional change will make it extraordinarily hard for anyone to undo his actions. So just addressing that, because, I mean, we're trying to figure out what it is. Why has he done this volte-face? Why has he done it?
That's not true based on the polling. The polling suggests that young people are actually going more towards reform. So, I don't think we will franchise 16-year-olds, but if we did, the results wouldn't be as he's suggesting.
Yeah, reform are in number 1 amongst 16s. However, of course, he doesn't like reform at all.
Right.
Now, I'm coming to why that is. But
So does he dislike reform more than he dislikes the Tories?
he dislikes anything new. So the key line in this entire article, because I was searching it for a killer argument as to why we should be so much more afraid of Labour than we should of the Conservatives. And this is something I had a whole conversation with him before the election. And we come to my conversation and your conversation. But I think what's driving it is this one line in the article.
Yeah.
From what could we now fashion a new Conservative movement? If we had the will and the opportunity, where is the human material? And I think that's the nub of it. He basically doesn't credit anyone under the age of 65 as having anything worth saying at all. He just doesn't have any faith in the new generation of the right. And I mean, you see this when he's on stage with people. I mean, he will be reasonably courteous to people of his own generation. But I mean, he's been very rude about myself, about yourself, everyone else he interacts with. I mean, he did that unheard stage thing with Matt Goodwin and called him a child. You know, I think, and Peter, if you're watching, correct me on this. Do correct me, which I'm sure you will, and you're welcome to come on the show and put your point of view across. And if, beyond that, you know, you can come in. We'll send a car to your house, or we can come to you, or you can do it remote. If you want the right to reply, you've got it. But I think fundamentally, it's that he just has no faith in the younger Conservative movement, or the younger right-wing movement.
But sounding cliche, the young Conservative movement is the future of the Conservative movement.
In fact, the younger people are now bucking the trend. Normally, as people get older, they become more conservative, and it's actually the opposite now, isn't it? That the young people are more conservative than, say, the baby boomers, and by a significant margin as well. And that's true of lots of other European countries as well. So it seems to be a movement all across Europe and perhaps North America as well. But it seems to certainly be going on in all over Europe.
Well, it depends what you're trying to conserve.
Right.
And I found this very interesting thread by not a well-known account, but I think this was a great thread and sort of explains it, by Dr. Sign or whatever he is. And he put this good thread up, and I tried to promote it, but it didn't do particularly well, where he looked at Hitchens' philosophy over time. And I just want to pick a few bits out because this, for me, is kind of gets the closest that I've seen to a genuine explanation of what's going on. And his analysis is, the first thing to clear up is that he, Peter Hitchens, has never been particularly animated by the survival of ethnic Britons. It is not meant as a criticism of the great man, it is just a statement of fact. For all those tearing their hair out, that doesn't seem to be his abiding priority. It never was. Of far higher value, of supreme importance to Peter Hitchens, has been the unique liberties and institutions locked up within the peculiar evolution of Britain over the centuries. He's much more what you would call a structuralist than a nationalist. He intuits that a Starmer supermajority will utterly abolish its last vestiges. So don't think him a hypocrite when you imagine him betraying principles which he's never actually held. His whole destroy the Tories bit was a function of what he was really trying to protect. And now, them remaining on parliamentary life support serves the same ends to him. Thus, in this effect, is based on your understanding of Hitchens, while at the same time he doesn't understand you. The ignorance is quite bilateral. Really, if he does have a failing, it is a woeful lack of comprehension. And that kind of rings true for me. It's not... And the key is, he doesn't so much care about the British people, he cares about Britain, the set of the institutions. And we are all coming at it from the point of view of the Britain, the people. And it just, and that, when I read it, I just thought that explains so much of why we're talking past each other.
Yeah, because in that original video, he said, there has to be a new Conservative movement to replace the old Conservative. And in that article, he said there has to be some kind of new Conservative. But you've pointed out he doesn't like anything new. So it wasn't about a new movement. It was about a way to control what the status quo was.
Exactly. And just looking, because I've had loads of interactions with him on Twitter, a number of us have. That just, for me, it just sounds right. He's not trying to preserve us, the people. He's not trying to preserve the Britons. He's trying to preserve the set of institutions that existed at the time of his youth.
which a Burkean conservative would say we have to protect the institution, we have to conserve the institutions to the point that they are still fit for purpose to their original objective. And when they go off target, then we should reform them and or demolish them. And that's where we're at. Things like the BBC are a good example. And the NHS, they're no longer fit for purpose. Therefore, we should either reform them or demolish them.
Because, I mean, I had a number of exchanges with him. One of the ones I said to him is, look, Peter, you're not going to convince anybody until you address the trade-off of immigration. And basically, I was explaining, the reason why we were fearful of the Labour Party was because we didn't want to get swamped with mass immigration. Well, if the Tories are doing that to us anyway, it removes the reason as to why we want to keep Labour out. So therefore, we might as well destroy the Conservative Party and get something else in its place.
Absolutely.
And he just couldn't connect with the point that I was making. And he just shot back some insult along with, I've been talking about mass immigration for years. And it's like, no, I'm not talking about mass immigration in general. I'm talking about the trade-off at this election, which I think I might have this further on.
Okay.
But again, look, Peter, if you think I'm wrong, I mean, you got my email, we've corresponded, come in, or we go to you, or we can do a remote link. And if you want to correct the record on any of this, but I genuinely do feel that we've been talking past each other, and I am trying genuinely to try and get my head around what your criticism is.
Right.
In fact, I can back this up a little bit with my next link. Let's see if I can get that. Because, of course, when he was making the argument that, vote against the Labour Party, don't vote for anyone. Well, of course, people will come back and say, well, what if I live in Clacton? That surely means I've got to vote for Nigel Farage, because that would be voting against the Labour Party, or otherwise. And he comes back, Reform are not Conservatives; they are right-wing nationalist radicals.
So therefore, it's not voting against Labour at all. It's not tactical voting. If in Clacton the Reform Party has the best chance of defeating the Labour Party, and he says don't vote for them because they're not Conservatives, then it's not about voting against Labour.
Yeah, because Reform does not represent anything that he considers valuable. He wants to protect institutions. And what he's saying to you there is, first of all, the right-wing nationalists. So first of all, he doesn't care for nationalism. He doesn't care for the people as such. He just doesn't see that as a concern. It's the institutions he wants to protect. So when he calls them nationalists, i.e. irrelevant, and second, radicals, Reform are far more likely to come along and put in place new institutions.
That's the problem there, isn't it? Because what conservative, a smart chap like him would see that a right-wing nationalist party is conservative because they want to conserve the nation and they want to protect the demographic of the country.
But I don't. I mean,
it's not just the people; it is the idea of the nation too.
Yes, but I mean, I'm not wedded to the constitutional arrangements because they've all been so polluted and corrupted. I'm quite happy to tear them all down and start again. And my concerns are protecting the people. Which is not a concern for him. So I think that tweet is very revealing when you break it down.
Yeah.
It's all about that conservatism. So then we ought to get on to some of the spats that might have cropped up. Okay. Because it turns out the mild Kelvin here has been incredibly rude to Peter Hitchens. He says, replying to somebody else who presumably was defending you, as far as I know, I may have missed it, Calvin has not apologised for his extremely rude and factually mistaken of me yesterday. Like you, I wish he would, but I cannot forgive him until he does. So, Calvin, you were extremely rude, were you?
Was I? All I said is that you've been speaking about demolishing the Conservative Party for decades, and then at the last hurdle, you buckled. And that's what the word I used, buckled. He said that was nasty and extreme. I'm like, how is that? And his responses have been pretty rude, to be fair. This is just one of many.
Well, let's have a look at this extremely rude tweet of yours. Do you want to read it or shall I?
You have spent years telling us that the Conservative Party must be utterly destroyed, that this is the only way to break free from the political malaise. And when we finally got an opportunity to do so, you buckled and backed them. Will you be working to dismantle what remains of the Tories in the next election, or are you on board with the uniparty now?
I really don't believe that Peter Hitchens has led such a sheltered life that he genuinely believes that is a rude tweet.
I mean, it's quite blunt and to the point, which is how I tweet, but I don't think it's rude. I don't think
you could say that to somebody's face.
He said this is nasty.
Yes. I mean, well, that is the sort of thing that you would say to somebody's face.
I absolutely would, yeah.
And that is apparently being described as extremely rude.
And I figured it was just because I didn't show due reverence.
Well, you're under 65, so
Right.
as we've established, he doesn't care for that much.
Maybe he's just a very devout Confucian. That
Yes.
might be it. You've really got to respect one's elders above all.
But I've only
Yes.
replied twice, so I put this out and then I put that response you've just seen. I've only replied to. There's like a dozen tweets that he's tagged me in, and I can't. I don't always see them because of the way he does his weird tweeting. But he's gone on a rampage. He's gone on a rant, and he's got really personal ad hominems. It's like, how am I the nasty one here?
Yes.
Because I dared question.
Yes.
How dare I question you?
Well, yes. Essentially, he's very upset that somebody who isn't Owen Jones has the sheer temerity to speak to him as if they've got something to say on his level. Because weirdly, he will have conversations with Owen Jones and Aaron Bastani, but for whatever reason, he avoids engaging with anyone on the right. He won't accept the arguments. But if we are going to accept the premise that Peter is allergic to anyone ever being rude, oh, here we go. There's another one on yours. I strongly object to being told untruly that I support or sympathise with the Tories. Yes, Peter, you simply engineered a situation where people kind of had to vote for them in order to follow your advice.
He has a massive influence as well. When he writes on the Daily Mail blog, vote against Labour, but don't vote for Reform or whatever he's saying, he's telling people to vote for the Conservatives, whether he believes it or not.
And he'll argue against that point, but it's unavoidable. Absolutely unavoidable. If you're saying, there are 3 doors, a red door, a yellow door, and a blue door, and you must at all costs avoid going through the red door.
But don't go through the blue door.
Yes. Yes. Yes, quite. Anyway, so on the point of Peter Hitchens being allergic to being rude in tweets, this is a tweet that he sent at me a while back. More mucus from King Bingo. This is the one that I mentioned earlier about how I say, look, you've got to address the mass immigration issue as it relates to this election. And he dodged that. So there he is accusing me of mucus. Let's go to another one. This is the one where he calls me deluded. I've got loads of these, by the way. What was I saying in this one?
Whatever it is, you don't understand. This is the problem. This is the snobby intellectualism of these kind of people. Like, you don't understand. You can't engage with me. You just don't understand. Like, okay, then spell it out. What is the problem, and how do you see it? And then we can find common ground. Yeah,
make the argument. Yeah, either you don't understand the workings of the electoral system, or you are deluded. A large reform vote by people who would normally vote both Tory, vote Tory, will deliver Keir Starmer and make Ed Davey opposition leader. Reform might get 1 seat. Well, okay, let's just dig in on that. They didn't get 1 seat, they got 5.
Well, he's not reading the prevailing wind, is he? Because it was entirely obvious that the Conservatives did not stand a challenge in this election. They were obviously going to be decimated, and that's why I think a lot of people felt like they could vote Reform, because they knew that, okay, well, the Conservatives aren't going to form the government anyway. I don't even have to vote to keep Labour out because we know we're going to get them anyway, so we can vote on our principles. He's
making a number of errors there. I mean, first of all, like I said, they got 5 seats, not 1, and actually they came second in 98 seats. So had he have got on board and used his platform of influence to get on board 0 seats, Reform could have had anywhere up to 103 seats, and they would be the official opposition, and his lifelong dream of destroying the Tory party would be achieved. But, as I said above, I think the only thing he would ever want to replace the Conservative Party with is a party that is even more wedded to the conservation of the institutions, not the people, which is a different thing. So, so I think
this is it, isn't it? A lot of us thought, look, Labour are going to win regardless.
Yes.
Not that they're going to get a landslide, but the Tories are going to lose. So the Tories are going to hand this to Labour. Therefore, if Labour are going to get in office anyway, we can send a message to the Tories. But I think...
Well, I don't think it's sending a message. I
would say that. Some of us would say it's because... And people like him would... Maybe you would join him in arguing that that's sentimental. And you can't vote in sentimentality. But I think a lot of people in this country have said, we're sick and tired of the Conservative government. 14 years they haven't delivered on immigration, on NHS, on education, on cultural issues, on economic issues. They haven't worked towards making this a better country. Therefore, we're no longer going to lend them our vote. And so we're going to vote Reform instead. And we can because Labour are going to get into power anyway. And that might be slightly sentimental, but that's how people think.
I'd only change the framing on that is that I wouldn't describe it as lending them my vote, because if what you meant by that is that it is naturally a Conservative vote, and I'm taking it away from them.
No, I'm saying I'm not going to lend the Tories my vote in this election. I'm going to lend it to someone else because they don't own it. They're not entitled to my vote.
Yes, and I think one of the fundamental assumptions that Peter was making is that if reform didn't exist, all of those reform votes would simply go straight to the Conservatives.
I think most people... I didn't decide until an hour before the vote. I was thinking I'm either going to not bother turning up, or if I do turn up, I'll spoil my ballot. And I'm a natural Conservative voter. I've always voted Conservative. So I wasn't going to vote Conservative if reform weren't there. I happened to speak to my reform local representative who was a Christian and believed in sanctity of life, so I voted for her. But if I hadn't voted for her, I would not have voted for the Tories.
Well, YouGov did polling on this, and they found that only 26% of reform voters would switch back to the Tories if there wasn't a reform candidate.
So he's wrong, objectively wrong.
So, I mean, certainly in my case, there was no way that I was going to vote for the party that locked me down for 2 years.
Well, I'm never going to vote Conservative ever again. Under no circumstances, no matter what they do. I just don't trust them.
Yep.
I'm happy to say never in this circumstance, because the entire apparatus is captured by people that don't mean Britain well. I don't trust them at all. And I think that many of the Conservatives that sacrifice their principles for the sake of furthering their careers and basically making more money have got off lightly by losing their seats, to be honest. Given what they did to us over those 2 years and everything else, all the other crimes they perpetrated. But fundamental misunderstanding on that one. What do we got on the next one? Oh, this is the one where he's calling me dishonest. And what's this one about? This is a follow-up point to another one I think make further on, which is, no, I don't think the Tories are going to be destroyed in this election, but you need to break the spell. The whole thing with 0 seats is that you get Reform a larger share of the vote, and then the following election they get properly replaced.
Yes.
And he was trying to suggest it was dishonest of me. I mean, I've read all your bloody books, Peter. I know what your argument on this one. So that's where he calls me dishonest. What's
this country has been stuck in a tribal mentality for so long that we either turn up to, even if we say up until the moment, I'll vote UKIP, I'll vote Brexit, whatever. Yes. Up until that moment, we turn up in the polling booth. We go, okay, I've always voted Tory, I go vote Tory, or my family's always voted Labour, I vote Labour, and it's a two-party uniparty system because it's first past the post. This is the first election I feel where we're breaking that perception.
Yes.
And so you're right, in the next one, it could be even different because people are starting to say, wait a minute, I don't have to vote for one of those two. The other party does have a chance. We can change. And Reform can do the whole Lib Dem trick now of, in 98 constituencies, saying only Reform can win here. Which would be true. Yes, which would be true, yeah. This is the one where he calls me snide and untruthful. Don't worry, there's loads of these. Why does he always resort to ad hominem? Well, I think the reason he does it is because if he can't win the argument on its own grounds, what he wants to do is to bait you into saying something unpleasant, at which point he can then immediately claim a moral victory. Yeah. And things look at my tweet below. I was, Peter, the offer for a courteous face-to-face discussion remains open, but this format is achieving little. And all the time I'd been extremely respectful because I've seen him do this so much that I know that he wants to bait you. And so he's a cry bully, is what he is. Is what? He's a cry bully. Like, he'll get you to say something offensive so he can put, look at this guy. It's like, no, you are the problem. Yeah. Yeah. So what else have we got? Oh, this is where he calls me pretentious. Nobody has even voted yet, and you are being manipulated by the polls. You seem anxious to avoid any responsibility for helping to elect a militant Labour government. Well, I didn't vote for them. I've never voted for them. And in fact, I might just dig into, the point I was making. If I can, here we go. So basically, what are the key arguments I had to him? Let's go into this one. Because at some point he accused me of being an idiot for not understanding that the SNP were a thing, as an attempt for a new political party to form. And I said, well, I am very familiar with the SNP, but let's cast our minds back further. Let's go back to the 1910 election. So in the 1910 election, the Tories were competing against the Whigs. The Tories were a very unpopular... In fact, the whole ruling class was unpopular. And people voted out the Tories and went to the Whigs, and they won this huge majority. But it didn't solve the fact that there was this ruling class dissatisfaction. And that 1910 Liberal landslide, or was it 1906? 1906 Liberal landslide basically set them up for destruction.
because they couldn't deliver on anything, because they didn't have any answers. And by 1922, the Liberal Party was destroyed.
Right.
And so this is the argument I was making to him. And I kept on,
it's been done.
And I made this argument to him, and in the post before I was saying, well, you haven't addressed the argument. And at some point he shoots back with, I have addressed it, you lost. But you didn't address it. You never addressed any of these arguments. You just you just throw out these ad hominems in the hope that you can claim a moral victory.
Well, I've just ignored him now. I'll just let him he's shout in the wind. He's still quote tweeting me as we're on air now. It's like, just get on with it, mate. If you want to have a little rant, if it makes you feel better, good for you.
Well, I put that stuff up about the difference between trying to defend a people and trying to defend a set of institutions, because I think that does go to a lot of it.
I think you've done that in good faith as well, and I hope he does come back and have a conversation with you.
Well, and he's you got my email. We've exchanged emails. You're more than welcome to come on and put your point of view. But I'm just genuinely trying to get to why there is this massive schism between people who admire you and what you seem to be saying. Yeah. And I think it boils down to you're trying to preserve institutions, not people, and that you just don't think that there is any human capital in the under 65s that is worth having, and therefore you have no faith in us to build anything new of any value. So, if I'm wrong, let me know.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Connor's series, Tomlinson Talks, this one about how to prevent population collapse with Paul Morland. And if you want to see all of the other work we put out, we always post links to our Twitter. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.